To another edition of the Ad Podcast. We have been out of pocket for a couple weeks, at least for the live show. So we are excited to be back and kicking off Monday strong. We've got an exciting guest for you guys today. Emma Witkowski is a highly accomplished digital media executive, strategic investor, and the vice president of media solutions at WildBrain, a global leader in kids and family entertainment. In her role, she drives advertising sales and monetization strategy across WildBrain's massive digital ecosystem, including YouTube, fast channels, AVOD, and immersive gaming integrations on Roblox and Fortnite for timeless properties like Teletubbies, Strawberry Shortcake, and Inspector Gadget. And for all of you who were at Cannes, you might have seen the Teletubbies running around and giving us all a little bit of joy or terror, depending on what years we grew up and raised kids and had younger brothers and sisters. But it was a really fun activation. So Emma, I'm excited to hear a little bit about that and how that all came together. So thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to talk about this. It was a wild, crazy week in the best possible way.
I love it. Well, we did I think 60 shows over the 5 days, and I am sad to say that I did not run into the Teletubbies, but I saw them all over my social media feeds and heard a lot of fun conversations about them, probably just because I was stuck usually in, a press room or some kind of a, place shooting the show. But I want to get all into the activation, but maybe we can, just maybe take a quick step back and start on your background a little bit. So where did you grow up? What did you study? And how'd you get into kids media?
Yeah, so I grew up in North Yorkshire, so in England. What did I study? I didn't take a traditional path. I actually skipped college or university.
Wow.
As it's called over there. I have never liked learning through exams. I've always found that I'm better learning through doing. So I skipped that route. I skipped all of that. And then my mum and dad had a pub. So I grew up in a pub. And one day, one of the customers was sat at the bar and he was like, he owned a media agency. And he said, "Oh, I'm looking for a TV assistant if you want to come in and interview for it." So at 19 years old, I found myself buying TV media back in the days of direct response television. One of my clients was SafeStar Windows. So whenever an ad went out, I had to go to their office to answer the phone.
Full funnel, huh?
Exactly. So that really put me on the trajectory of being in advertising. I moved to London, from London to Los Angeles. Predominantly on the media agency side, leading digital strategy and investment teams. And then about 6-7 years ago, I got on a call with someone at Moonbug, ended up at Moonbug, and that's really how I ended up in kids content. As someone who doesn't have kids, I never thought kids content would be where I landed, but I absolutely love it. I'm so passionate about it. And I'm also now the best auntie in the world because, all my godchildren get merch and know things. So, yeah.
I love that. So, so tell us a little bit about, for those that aren't familiar with WildBrain, I think we're very familiar with the properties. So obviously Teletubbies, Strawberry Shortcake, Inspector Gadget, these are all very nostalgic properties that go back, some of them to, I'm an older millennial, but go back to when I was a kid. Inspector Gadget was on TV when I was a youngster. Can you tell us a little bit about WildBrain and kind of how it's evolved throughout the years and where does it stand in the ecosystem today?
Yeah, so we have Yo Gabba Gabba. I think we have such a great portfolio of IP because it spans different age ranges for kids. And you're totally right. It is nostalgic IP that the new generation of parents grew up with. The Teletubbies actually, it's their 30th anniversary next year. So that's 3 decades of tubby love, big hugs and lots of fun. So WildBrain, there's 3 different parts of our business. We have an award-winning content studio that creates all of the content for our own IP, as well as the content for other IPs that we work with, such as Lego, Spin Master, other global entertainment companies. The second part of the business is our network, which is where Media Solutions sits within. And that's really about the distribution of the content and putting the content in front of audiences wherever they're watching, whatever platform they're watching on. So obviously YouTube is a huge part of that strategy, but we also see FAST as a really fast growing part of our business as well. And I think that's what WildBrain has been really successful at. As a legacy TV company, back in 6 years ago, they saw audiences were fragmenting, audiences were moving away from linear TV, and really went full in on YouTube and Fast. And for us, Fast is a really special place because we run single IP channels. So it's the home of Teletubbies, Strawberry Shortcake. Parents love it because it's a very safe environment. And kids, 4, 6, 8 years old, they get really obsessed with something for a year, a couple of years. So that's what we found with our Fast channels.
I love that. Yeah, my son is 3 and he's gone from watching the Disney show Cars over and over and over again to watching dinosaurs. But, like he always asks me, he's like, oh, he wants me to turn on dinosaurs on the TV, which basically means turn on YouTube, find a dinosaur video, and then, but my only hesitation with that is like a lot of times these shows are like kind of this weird productions that's like from somebody in like Eastern Europe, and they're playing with dinosaur toys, and it's definitely not premium. And I've heard that sometimes those rabbit trails can kind of lead to like interesting places. But yeah, I had never thought about the idea of like just turning on like a fast channel that's 100% dedicated to one property 24/7. You're going to get, that particular brand of entertainment. So how important has fast been for you guys? And I imagine kind of the parents, my model as like, TV as a babysitter in a lot of ways when I'm running 2 households that work. My son is home with me for a period of time, and I can kind of like watch him at an arm's distance if he's, in the other room watching TV. But, you talked about the brand safe kind of fast environment. Why do you think parents are flocking to that as an option rather than just turning on YouTube, et cetera?
I think it's the role that the algorithm plays. There's not an algorithm on fast channels. It's programmed like linear TV. So parents feel quite comfortable with that. I think, obviously there's a lot happening in the made for kids space right now with lawsuits with different social platforms. I think something that YouTube did do was they created the kids app, which works very differently to YouTube main. So they have tried to create an environment that is really safe for kids. But yeah, I think Fast, it doesn't have that algorithm driving it. So parents feel safe with it. I've actually just started calling it super fans now because that's what we really see. I know not all fast channels are that, and it's different audiences, but for kids, we really see it as a place and for fandom.
Do you think we're approaching peak fast? I did some work in the fast space on the travel side last year, and met with partners at Samsung and all the OEMs, and there's getting close to like 900 channels on some of these platforms. Do you think maybe we might see a pushback into like more branded programmed fast channels where you would maybe have like a WildBrain channel with different hours for different types of content? Or do you think this idea of the single IP is sustainable with just how many channels these OEMs are looking to support these days?
I think single IP has been so successful for us that it doesn't make any sense for us, certainly right now, and unless something changes, for us to have a mixed fast channel. We're really supporting the single IP.
Yeah, and I think for kids, the way that you talked about how kids are viewing it, just like, and I love that idea of the super fan, right? Like, they just want to go deep with one particular thing, and they're going to be obsessed with it for a period of time, maybe 6 months to a year, and then they're on to the next thing that they discover.
Exactly. I've renamed it Fans and Super Targeted.
I love that. That's fun. All right. You guys have done some pretty exciting integrations into larger RP or larger ecosystems, rather. Roblox and Fortnite come to mind. My kids are huge Roblox players, my 10 and 12-year-old girls. we dual play Fortnite together. Can you talk about how you guys are translating these properties into other immersive arenas like multiplayer games, and specifically Roblox and Fortnite, which has so much customization, so much opportunity for fandom building and brand insertion, but also, is where kids are spending a lot of time socializing with friends.
It is. So we see a huge correlation between co-viewing and co-gaming, and people coming from YouTube, families doing it together. To your point, I think it's a great way to bring families together, and we're seeing that shared screen time, it is about bringing people together. Shared screen time is actually the third most popular family bonding moment after eating together and going away together. So families are really buying into it. So you talked earlier a little bit about the co-viewing. I think co-viewing's really evolved, and we call it shared screen time now, because it's not so much about that babysitter, as you spoke to earlier, where you're kind of just looking at. We're finding that parents are actually sitting down and watching, whether it's gaming or it's, and we see that as well with the CTV. It's almost 70% of our views on YouTube come via CTV. So it's that big screen experience, and families are really, really buying into that. I think with gaming, look, we certainly test it. We've got a Strawberry Shortcake game that is on Roblox right now. I think with kids IP, you've really got to think about what are the age demos of the kids that are fans of the IP, because obviously you need kids to be a certain age to be playing on gaming platforms. So yeah, we're testing Strawberry Shortcake, and it's certainly on our radar of what to do, because to your point, there's a huge audience there.
Love it. All right, let's talk a little bit about how Teletubbies showed up at Cannes this year. So tell us a little bit about the process. How did you guys come up with this idea? What was the execution like? And be curious, if you were able to tie it back to outcomes, or how you thought about measuring success as you went into Cannes this year.
Yeah. So I should start by saying we decided 6 weeks out that we were going to go to Lion. So the first thought in my head was, oh my goodness, where am I going to be staying? Because everything is booked. It's like, I'm going to be in some rat-infested, no aircon apartment.
I got super lucky. I waited until 3 days before, and I got a place right behind the Carlton. Sometimes, that was definitely a gamble, though. I wouldn't advise that in the future.
Yeah, I'm too much of a control. That would give me a lot of anxiety. So, Cannes Lion is the place to be, right? All the senior leaders are there, the CMOs, you have the thought-provoking panels. But in reality, it is really hard to get cut through unless you have a big budget for a beachfront, a yacht to host parties on, helicoptering people to Saint-Tropez. So we had to really think about, if we were going to do it, what would we do? And we decided we weren't going to go.
Wow.
6 weeks out, and I had a call with Talia, who's the president of the FQ, and they've just announced Camp at Cannes in partnership with Lowe's. The premise was, why should people have to decide whether they show up as a leader at work or they show up as a parent at home? Camp at Cannes allowed them to do both. So we loved it. It was a brilliant initiative. So in my conversation with Talia, we came up with the idea of bringing the Teletubbies, and that really was the start of it. From there, it just exploded. So we went into Camp at Cannes every day to a dance party with the Teletubbies. The kids, just the look on their face. And I've got some really emotional stories that came out of it. There was one little girl, she didn't really want to be at camp. She wasn't very happy, but she created this connection with Lala, to the point that she started coming in dressed in yellow so that she could see Lala. And then on the last day, they were both literally crying. Lala was crying as well, saying bye to each other. So again, just the kids' content and kids' IP, the emotional connection it has. So we were doing Camp at Cannes in the not the Carlton, the other one. It'll come back to me in a minute.
Martinez, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Which in itself was pretty hilarious, because obviously that is where all the top meetings happen. So walking through the lobby with the Teletubbies and seeing all these really senior people being like, "I've got to get my phone out. I've got to get my phone out. I've got to get a picture," was pretty crazy. So from there, we then did activations at Ad Age. They had a happy hour that we went to. Had a really interesting chat with the president of Ad Age, who was like, "Hey, I don't get it. Why are they here?" I said, "Just wait till they come out and then let's talk about it." And literally they came out, the whole room went crazy. He came over to me and he was like, "This is the best guerrilla marketing campaign I've seen in a long time." So, then we did Ad Week's Creator 100 party. And then we did, the last night we performed at Canva's Pride party, in which we needed a special forces security detail to get us around the party because people were going so mad. It was honestly such a surreal week. And I think for Canva, it just felt like the perfect natural fit, giving joy and inclusivity as part of the Teletubbies DNA.
I love it. That's so cool.
But I guess overall, taking the Teletubbies to camp, drive awareness of the power of kids' content and the emotional connection it has with audiences. We use the Teletubbies as that vehicle because they're celebrating their 30th anniversary next year. So we wanted to raise awareness of that. And really, it was just a moment of sparking joy and surprise and delight for everybody that was there.
That's so cool. So I just want to take a step back at Camp at Cannes. So this is the first time I'm hearing about this. Is the idea that, if you are a parent and you want to go to Cannes, you can bring your kids with you and you can drop them off at kind of day camp in partnership with Lowe's and FQ?
Exactly.
My gosh.
Incredible idea. I think the FQ are brilliant at coming up with these things. But yeah, so camp was open from, I think, 8 a.m. till 6 p.m. I might have the hours slightly off. But yeah, you drop your kid off. You could go and do your business meetings. They could go for half a day, a full day. They had swimming. They had the Teletubbies coming in for dance parties. They did a lot of coloring and things like that. And the kids just absolutely loved it.
That's so amazing. I had my 3 kids. I had my 10-year-old, my 12-year-old, and my 3-year-old there all week. And, my wife was taking them to the beach and running around, from the hotel, but I'm sure she would have loved to have been able to drop them off for a few hours and go do some adult things, or maybe come with me to a couple of cocktail parties or something like that. So I'll have to bookmark that for next year for sure. I hope they do it again.
Definitely. They had, it was such a good activation.
So cool. All right. So I wanted to ask you, you talked a little bit about this shift in family co-viewing. You've got the idea, that I was talking about of kind of like, passively putting your kid in front of the screen and letting them kind of watch content. Then you've got, kids, parents sitting in the room watching together, maybe multi-screen device, kids watching intently while mom or dad's on the couch, surfing something else on a second screen. And then you've got family co-viewing in the gaming environments of like where multi-generational players, a dad like me who's 45 and then my daughter's 10 and 12 all playing together, or like on Roblox on different devices in different rooms of the house. Can you talk about some of the, the trends around co-viewing? Why is it important for marketers to think about it as a different type of opportunity to target? And what are some of the results that you've seen in really thinking about this dynamic of co-viewing?
Yeah, so we see that 99% of our audience co-view at least once a week. And I think just under 60% do it multiple times a week. So it's definitely happening. And I think we're not the only people that show results like that. YouTube have very similar results. All of our competitors, we're all saying the same thing. I think the disconnect is the fact that we can't measure it, right? We can't prove it. And that's something that we're trying to work with YouTube on. And then Sim, recently they did a press release last week that they've brought together a group of people, which WildBrain are included, to try and tackle the measurement challenges in the Made for Kids space, obviously in a compliant way that protects kids and data. But I think Talking about co-viewing, it's a really powerful moment in advertising, and it's something that advertisers seem to have forgotten about, because for decades brands have bought into this on linear TV. They've understood the importance of reaching the family collectively, or parents, mum especially, within kids content. And they did it for decades. They invested a lot of money in it. And again, you couldn't articulate, you couldn't actually measure that mum was in the room, but they still knew that this environment of connecting with the family together was important. But now it's moved to digital platforms. They want to put digital metrics against it. And obviously we can't do that because of the lack of measurement in the space. So I feel like it's a really important, powerful moment in advertising that has been forgotten about. And that's a lot of the work that I'm doing when I'm talking to agencies and brands, is reminding them that that opportunity is still available. It's just in a different place.
Can you talk about the importance of contextual targeting when it lines against kids content? Obviously, you spent a lot of time at WPP Mindshare, Omnicom, et cetera, these big agencies that occasionally have to try and find ways to target kids but still staying within compliance around measures like COPA. What we found over the years is that the best way to target a demographic under 13 is by aligning with the content that a certain group of kids watch. Like Teletubbies might have a very specific demographic of, say, I don't know, I'm just making this up, but maybe ages 4 to 6, where something like Inspector Gadget might be interesting to, 8 to 10-year-old boys. Again, me making it up. But can you talk about the importance of contextual targeting? Not targeting a person, because you can't legally. You're not, and you probably shouldn't anyways. But even if you could, but if you target, say, hey, I'm just going after Inspector Gadget content, I know I'm hitting a certain demographic of kid, knowing the types of kids that watch that, and then also, like you mentioned, the parent opportunities.
Yeah, so I think that's the advantage of being the publisher, because we own the IP, or we represent IP. So when we're building the content and building the franchise, it is aimed at very specific age demo of kids. So being the publisher, we know that. We know exactly. So, if someone comes to us and says they want 6 to 9-year-old girls, we know which exact IP that is built for the age demo. So I think that's the first really important part of it, being able to do that. In terms of contextual, we still do contextual. To your point earlier about your son wanting to watch dinosaurs, like, we use technology to go through our videos to see what they're about, what's in there, and we'll come up with contextual targeting based around that. I think we have our own IP channels and the channels we represent, but we also have a portfolio of 800 plus hub channels. And that's where we actually curate content that's around different sorts of themes. So that, exactly going into your contextual question, they are around contextual. So it could be dinosaurs, it could be princesses. So yeah, we align them so that we can drive more reach across our network, and have bigger audiences for advertisers to be able to reach.
Very cool. Can you talk about maybe the state of production inside of kids content? I mentioned at the top of the interview, I asked if we maybe missed each other at Kidscreen this year in San Diego. And sadly, shortly after Kidscreen went into bankruptcy and is no longer a thing. And a big frustration at Kidscreen this year, especially with independent producers or emerging producers. You guys probably don't have as much of these problems, but probably can comment maybe a little bit on, the world at large. It seems like nobody's funding shows anymore. Nobody's funding production. They're leaning exclusively on either IP publishers, independent producers, artists. They're basically putting all the burden of production and building an audience on you before they will give you a licensing agreement to come into like an environment like a Nickelodeon or some of these traditional places where kids content was watched. I'd be curious, just and then most of them are saying, hey, look, like we shouldn't even have to pay you that because you make so much money on toys and games. Can you maybe just give me a little bit of like high level on like kids content, from the perspective of the economics of it? You talked about also doing stuff for Lego and Spin Master, obviously two toy companies that, basically use content as a way to market their larger ecosystems of toys and amusement parks, etc. But just be curious of your kind of like high level take on kids content as an industry right now.
Yeah, so it's at an inflection point, and I think the long-term sustainability of premium kids content is at risk. It's getting harder and harder to be able to afford to create content. If you look traditionally, kids content has predominantly been funded by advertisers or by public broadcasters, and both of those revenue streams are at risk and under significant pressure. So I think back to my point earlier where I talked about all the advertisers that were investing in this environment in linear TV, but aren't now doing it in digital. It's a real problem. It's a safe environment. You can reach mum, you can reach dad with co-viewing shared screen time. But ad dollars really need to help. And then the other, and this isn't going to sound great to you for your Stripe social part of it, but the other is by going direct to the publisher. Because when revenue goes through third parties, tech companies, less of that money is getting to the publisher. So by going direct to the source, to the publisher, it means more money gets invested back into content.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously, yeah, Strike being a contextual targeting partner for brand safe environments, I think there's a world in which that helps, but I agree with you. I think, publisher direct, not only do you get, position one in the auction, the best possible placement for your ad dollars, but I imagine you are probably unlocking other types of opportunities for advertisers that are willing to invest directly with you, whether that's integrations, branded content, maybe production that then, gets you campaignable assets that you could run inside of your owned and operated channels, or maybe as your media buy across some of these platforms. I'd be curious, to those that say, oh, I can access kids content programmatically, and people who are arguing for the strike in our competitor set, what types of things are you unlocking for publishers other than just being position one in the auction?
Yeah, so first, when people say I can access it programmatically, it really depends what platform you're using, because the trade desks don't have a COPA compliant product. They won't let me in there. Amazon's DSP won't either. So there's some of the biggest DSPs that don't even allow kids content into their platform.
Wow.
So that in itself is an issue. The second part of, sorry, what was the second part of your question?
Well, I was curious, like, whenever I sell, a publisher direct opportunity, it's always around like, spend X amount. If you hit these thresholds with us, we'll give you these extra integration opportunities. We'll create a commercial for you. We'll do integrations in the content itself versus just give you the inventory. We'll include you in a Teletubbies activation at Cannes, like kind of these like, they might feel like, icing on the cake, but these are important. These are important things that, advertisers are trying to get more and more out of their working dollars these days. They're trying to drive more and more non-working perks. But are there other things that you can do to kind of sweeten the cake as a publisher with the bigger advertisers that you work with direct?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what you just talked about, I think it's about the high impact placements, right? The more integrated branded content. So because we operate our YouTube channels, we can do homepage takeovers, we can do quite cool stuff that brings the brand in, like the spotlight video. We have control over those things. So we can make sure that they've got a lot of high impact and awareness there. The studios love it because obviously they want to create as much noise as possible before the movie releases. So we're able to help them do that. And then further into it, I think it's the real kind of branded content integration, and whether that is creating, a YouTube series that's predominantly targeted at, the shared screen time, the kid and the mum, or whether it's a social campaign that's targeted specifically at the parent, the mum and dad, So for me, that would be across Instagram, it would be TikTok, it would be Facebook. An example of one of that would be Tubby Travels. So tips for parents on traveling with toddlers for the first time.
I love that. Yeah, kids content is so important to that travel element, right? It's like you want to load up the iPad or the Kindle, and that's a great opportunity too, right? Like I literally feel like I buy a Kindle every time I go on a new trip because I can't find. I'm like, where is it? It's like, so I feel like that's a great opportunity on the hardware side as well
Yeah.
for, kind of like thinking about those moments of like, okay, where can you like not survive without your kids content?
Yeah.
It's so important sometimes.
And I think that's why being at Cannes was really important with the Teletubbies 30th anniversary, to showcase to brands how popular kids content is and how it really, really resonates, not just with kids, but with parents as well. The combination of nostalgia and joy, it taps into something universal. Nostalgia reconnects us with positive memories and emotions, while joy gives us a break from the constant noise and negativity people are surrounded by.
Yeah, can we talk a little bit about that nostalgia element? It's so big right now. I was in LA for a week last week, and my 12-year-old daughter is a creator. She has 60,000 followers on Instagram. So I took her to an activation for a brand that she was working with. But then I took them to 4 different malls in LA last week, so like go like one mall in Burbank. I took them to the Grove. I took them to the brand, one in Glendale. Like literally all they want to do now is go to the mall and like do kid things. We saw a movie. We haven't seen a movie in a long time. We saw the new Moana live action movie, and we saw it at the Burbank Cineplex with like the thing where you get to see it like on the sides of the screen as well, not just in the front.
Yeah.
It feels like this next generation, this Gen Alpha, like they want to be in the real world, but they also have this like, this nostalgia or this like rediscovery of like, Dr. Pepper is like on t-shirts, and like things from the night, like things that they can like relate to their parents, or like the parents have nostalgia, the kids have discovering for the first time, but they're doing it together.
They really do. I always say there's a reason that there's only ever Heinz ketchup in my fridge, because growing up, that was my mum would be like, we only ever have Heinz. So I think it is like Gen Alpha are the most influential generation that we've ever seen, because they have access to much more information via the internet. So we're seeing the influence that they have in the household on not just like, oh, I want this toy, but where we should eat, what takeout we should get, where we should go on vacation. They've got a real voice in that. So
what car we should drive.
Yeah, they do. So brands need to think about it in 2 ways. One, the short-term ROI, driving that conversation with the family, but 2, the long-term ROI, because you're building a relationship with Gen Alpha that at some point is going to be the credit card holder. So I think brands, and when we talk about joy and kids content being the most joyful moment and environment you can be in, I think this is what brands really need to start thinking about. But when I think specifically about nostalgia, we are in a world that is overflowing with information. Nostalgia really kind of cuts through that because it makes people feel something, and people remember how you made them feel much longer than forgetting what you said. So we're really seeing that a lot. I think for brands, it's incredibly powerful because people don't just remember what they saw, they remember how it made them feel. And that's why characters like the Teletubbies have such cultural relevance. I mean, it's 3 decades of cultural relevance. There's not many brands or IP that can say that. And it's because they do spark an emotional connection for adults and create that new experience for the kid at the same time.
Yeah, I love how you tied your brand loyalty to Heinz into like kind of like multi-generational, like the fact that it was part of your household. And I think a lot of times, kids entertainment brands can remind us of those connections that we had to brands throughout our lives. I think about the fact that I drove a Cadillac because my grandpa drove a Cadillac, and it was the sign of success when,
Yeah.
our family made it. You bought a Cadillac. And then in my, shower is Dr. Bronner's magical soap because my dad was a hippie and that's what we had in my shower growing up. But can you maybe, because we're moving to a world soon, I don't think it's quite here, but agentic commerce is probably peeking its head around the door. I think the first thing that we're probably going to be willing to outsource to AI robots and shopping agents is probably things that are staples, right? Or like commodities. So ketchup, do I care about Heinz? You care about Heinz because it's something that was familiar in your household and your mom cared about Heinz. I might not care about ketchup, but I care about, Dr. Bronner soap, and I don't want it a generic cheap soap. I want this specific brand of soap. Can you talk about, how you think brand loyalty is going to shift in a world where, maybe soon we're going to start saying, okay, agent, like go out into the world and shop for me for this particular thing. And in some instances, I only care about price and speed. And in other instances, I really care about brand.
Yeah. I look, a lot of the panels that I listen to, they're all talking about how you have to be culturally relevant and how AI is so important and it's going to change the world. But you can't use AI in reaching, Gen Alpha right now. So you can't be culturally relevant as a brand if you're not thinking about Gen Alpha. So every panel I listen to, they talk about being culturally relevant, AI, but no one ever mentions Gen Alpha. I think that's a big part of what we're really trying to do is educate people on the importance of this audience, like I talked about short term and long term, because you need to have that brand equity. Because you need to know if there's going to be robots doing the shopping for us, you need to have got in and built that brand loyalty, that brand equity early, so that they are going to be like me and be like, no, it's got to be Heinz.
Yeah, that's interesting. There's something else that I had talked to somebody on the show recently is that a lot of the fad or the initial hype around creating content, especially advertising with AI, is quickly kind of getting shelved because of the fact that you have to like label things that are created with AI inside of social media platforms. And like you said, Gen Alpha hates AI content creation. Like maybe it's kitschy for a moment and sometimes can be funny. Like I can't remember, there was that trend on TikTok, like about the vegetables that I'm like forgetting off the top of my head, but you might know it. But it was like this kids vegetables AI series that was like trending for a minute. But like, I would say like 99% of the time, AI content creation flops with Gen Alpha, and they almost see it as a pejorative. And you're actually starting to see this pop up in the ads library inside of Meta. Ads that are made with AI that have to be labeled as such are having less people engage, less people click, therefore become more expensive in the auction and actually flopping. So I'd be curious, like in the kid space, how are you guys approaching AI from a content creation perspective? Where do you blur the lines or like use it to enhance the process and maybe lower cost per minute, but then, still remain authentically pure to where, especially to where you don't have to label it as AI production?
Yeah, look, like any technology, we are testing it to see what's the best use for it. I think there's some uses in like localization. If you've got to localize in, 50 plus languages, 30 plus languages, then, there's a real role for it there. In terms of content creation, we believe that everything should be human led and driven by a human. I think we have been testing it. You can potentially do some kind of shorter form content with it, but you're talking like 10 seconds. A premium long form content has to be led by a human being. So yeah, we're like most people, we are testing it. But yeah, humans are very important.
All right. I wanted to maybe just take a couple throwbacks to your earlier career. So you launched one of Facebook's very first ad campaigns. I have a friend that launched the first brand deal when he was at MySpace, the first brand deal with Fox. How does it feel, to be part of something like so early, so revolutionary, and then kind of seeing, how far things have come since then? But that's a pretty profound thing to have been a part of, the very first ad campaign on Facebook.
Yeah, so we were doing the advertising for them. So
For Facebook.
yeah,
Awesome.
so when I
Yep.
was at Mindshare, it was the first time that Facebook felt like they needed to advertise their platform. It was quite a unique experience because you think Facebook Meta, they're so digitally savvy, so they know the marketplace, they know everything within their platform. So it was a real kind of education and really helping them understand the wider digital ecosystem, why they should be doing video ads on Hulu to drive awareness of the platform. Um, but yeah, it was pretty crazy. We overnight pretty much went from 0 to 100 million in ad spend.
That's crazy. Yeah, it's interesting how far that the platforms. I feel like most of the ads that I see about the platforms these days that aren't on the platforms themselves are all around like trust, like TikTok, advertising to parents that their platform is safe and that there are like tools to make sure. It feels like they're using those channels to try and reach maybe folks that aren't as engaged on their platforms, to almost for like more like brand enhancement types of campaigns now versus awareness, I suppose.
Yeah, we see trust is so important with parents, and I think this is an area that the gaming platforms really have to work on. Because they weren't built for kids; they were built for an older audience, and now they've got that younger audience there. They have a responsibility to ensure that they are safe environments for kids.
Yeah, talking about the safety component a little bit, navigating digital advertising for minors requires, we've talked a little bit about data privacy regulations like COPA and GDPR. How do you build high impact, programmatically scaled, automated, platforms across all these, YouTube and fast, but then, maintain a bulletproof strategy that shields audiences from predatory data tracking?
Yeah, so I think fast it's easier to do. YouTube is interesting, right? Because there's markets across the world that are further ahead than the US. So Australia was one of the first to really put in place. Well, the first thing they did was count YouTube as social, right? Because before that, YouTube kind of sat outside of it, so they counted YouTube as social. What we have seen is our audience for the Made for Kids app has increased because of that trust. So it's interesting because you can only buy the Made for Kids app through the publisher directly. You can't get it in the auction. You can't get it via a reseller. So I think brands are going to want to ensure they're in the safest possible environment. So I think we'll see a resurgence of the Made for Kids app, which historically has, skewed younger, but I think we're going to start seeing it, seeing older audiences, kind of 6+, start using the app as well, because that's going to be driven by their parents.
Yeah, just because they see it as a brand safe environment in which they can maybe be a little bit more diligent than I am when I just open up my, YouTube account and set my son in front of it. But one thing that I have noticed that like the YouTube app, like if you are just using the normal app and you're second screening, basically like me watching news programs and podcasts at night, my son watching them maybe during the daytime, I do feel like the app almost knows like, oh, it's nighttime. Dylan's probably watching. I'm going to put in his home screen stuff that he would normally watch. And then if I open it during the daytime, it's like dinosaur stuff and stuff that my son would watch. So I feel like they are kind of learning a little bit around like day parting, maybe as like a psychographic in which to like identify these accounts that are parent driven.
Yeah. I think to your point earlier, so it's the long tail of YouTube content, the unboxing videos, the stuff that's kind of there that isn't great from a quality point of view. It's how do the platforms kind of get control of that?
So if we look down the line 5 to 10 years out, with everything that's happening with AI, interactive storytelling, maybe the idea of children's entertainment and gaming continuing to merge, where do you see the future of kids' entertainment?
I think we need to sort the monetization issue out. That's kind of the number one, so we can carry on investing. I think content will remain really important, but experiences, I think, will continue to be in demand. People want that connection. So when I think about, would we do Can again, or are we doing anything similar to that? I think the short answer is yes. We haven't. We're in a lot of conversations right now about different events that are happening across the year. I think Can was such a huge success for us. When we look at the numbers, we spent $130,000 in total. That includes flights, food for the whole team, getting the Teletubbies there, and all of that. Off the back of that, we saw 1.3 billion earned media and social impressions.
Wow.
Valued at 12.6 million. And then the event appearance was valued at 350K. So that's 13 million in earned media value off 130K spent. Like, you don't often see ROI like that.
Well, not only ROI like that, like all of that 1 point, it's like ROI within your target demographic, right? It's like, I have heard a lot of people starting to say that like Can is becoming like a Coachella moment. Like there are a lot of creators and people that are going that have absolutely nothing to do with the business now that are just going strictly for like the parties and the social aspect, which I think is really interesting. Like how some of these, we've always had some of these like, like F1 is, really entertainment, but it's like got these advertising side pockets. It feels like the line between like professional trip and entertainment trip or whatever is starting to they're starting to blur in a way.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see the evolution of Can over the years. It started really as the creative agencies, celebrating the emotional connection through creativity. I think that was one of the founding pillars of Can Lions. But then what you've really seen over the last 5, 8, 10 years is the influence of tech partners. Now on Yacht Row, it's all the tech data platforms down there. But this year I did really see as well creators, and I think YouTube, TikTok, they're really trying to get a lot of creators there, because there are some great activations. Like Pinterest had a great activation where you selected on a card which one resonated most, and then they brought you a dessert based on that. So I think it is a great place for creators because there's so much content to capture there. It makes sense for them to be there.
I love it. Well, Emma, fascinating conversation, super exciting work that you guys are doing. If folks who are listening want to reach out and get to touch with you or learn more about WildBrain and the properties, where would you like to send folks to stay in touch?
Emma.Witkowski at wildbrain.com or on LinkedIn. Both places you can get hold of me. Although my sister-in-law has the exact same name as me at LinkedIn, so make sure it's the one at WildBrain.
Awesome. Well, we'll link to it in the show notes. And thanks, everybody. Really appreciate you joining our Monday show. If this is the first time you're watching, don't forget to give us a like or a subscribe. If you're listening, whatever platform you might be listening on, an honest review helps us find a larger audience organically. And if there is a media buyer out there that needs to know about the importance of reaching multifamily household, second screen viewers, Gen Alpha, and people that used to buy this demographic through TV and need to figure out how to do it through digital or why they should be doing it through digital, maybe a parent, maybe somebody who just would enjoy the conversation I had with Emma today, don't forget to share the show. And with that, we will see you all again shortly. Thanks for coming on, Emma.
Thank you so much for having me.